The moment Sarah Mitchell realized she was completely invisible to the world, she was standing in the middle of Grand Central Terminal, with tears streaming down her face, and not a single person stopped to ask if she was okay. Hundreds of commuters rushed past her like water around a stone, their eyes fixed on phones, on schedules, on anywhere but the broken woman sobbing in their midst. She had just lost her job, her apartment lease was up in 2 weeks, and the last message on her phone was from her sister, saying she couldn't help anymore. At 34 years old, Sarah felt like she had disappeared from her own life. She stumbled toward a bench, collapsing onto the worn wood, and buried her face in her hands. The station's noise swirled around her, announcements echoing off marble walls, the rhythm of 1,000 footsteps, the distant rumble of trains, but it all felt muffled, like she was underwater. She didn't know how long she sat there. Time seemed irrelevant when you had nowhere to be and no one waiting for you. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice was soft, almost hesitant. Sarah looked up to find an elderly woman standing before her, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. She wore a faded purple coat that had seen better decades, and her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun. But it was her eyes that caught Sarah, warm brown eyes that actually saw her. "I noticed you've been sitting here a while," the woman said gently. "Are you all right, dear?" Sarah opened her mouth to say she was fine, to deliver the automatic response that society expected, but something in those kind eyes broke through her defenses. "No," she whispered. "I'm really not." The woman lowered herself onto the bench with a soft grunt, her cane resting against her knee. "Would you like to talk about it?" "I'm in no hurry. Haven't been in a hurry for about 20 years now." Oh, small smile played at the corners of her mouth, and so Sarah talked. She told this stranger everything, about the corporate downsizing that had eliminated her position, about the medical bills from her father's illness that had drained her savings, about feeling like a failure when everyone else her age seemed to have it all figured out. The words poured out in a torrent, and the old woman simply listened, nodding occasionally, her weathered hand occasionally patting Sarah's arm. "My name is Eleanor," the woman said when Sarah finally fell silent. "Eleanor Chen, and I want to tell you something important." "Are you listening?" Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You are not invisible," Eleanor said firmly. "You are not a failure. You are a human being going through a difficult chapter, and that's okay. We all have those chapters. Some of us have whole volumes of them." She chuckled softly. "The question isn't whether hard times come, they always do. The question is what we do when they arrive." Eleanor reached into her large, worn purse and pulled out a small card. "This is the address of a community center in Brooklyn. I volunteer there. We help people who are going through transitions, job placement, temporary housing assistance, counseling services, all free. I want you to go there tomorrow. Ask for me." Sarah took the card with trembling fingers. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Eleanor's eyes grew distant for a moment. 43 years ago, I was sitting on a bench in this very station, crying just like you. I had just arrived in New York from Taiwan with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of fear. I didn't speak English well. I had no job, no place to stay. And a woman stopped to help me, a complete stranger who saw me when everyone else looked away. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. That woman changed my life. She helped me find work, helped me learn English, became my first friend in this enormous, terrifying city. When she passed away 10 years later, I made her a promise. I promised I would look for people who needed to be seen. I promised I would be for others what she was for me." Sarah felt fresh tears welling up, but these were different. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come tomorrow," Eleanor said, standing slowly with the help of her cane. "Say you'll let us help you. And someday when you're back on your feet, you pay it forward. You see someone who's invisible and you stop. That's how we change the world, dear. One kindness at a time." The next morning, Sarah almost didn't go. Pride and shame warred within her as she stood outside the subway station, Eleanor's card clutched in her hand. But something, maybe desperation, maybe hope, pushed her forward. The community center was housed in an old brownstone, its steps worn smooth by countless feet. Inside, the walls were painted a cheerful yellow, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Eleanor greeted her like an old friend, and within hours, Sarah found herself surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to help. Maria, a career counselor, helped her update her resume and practice interview skills. James, a social worker, connected her with a temporary housing program. Lisa, who ran job workshops, taught her about industries she'd never considered. They didn't judge her. They didn't make her feel small. They simply helped. But it was the other people at the center who truly transformed her perspective. She met Marcus, a veteran struggling with PTSD who was learning coding skills to start a new career. She met Yuki, a single mother who attended English classes while her daughter played in the center's childcare program. She met Robert, a former teacher who had lost everything to gambling addiction and was now 2 years sober and helping others in recovery. Each person had a story. Each person had fallen, and each person was getting back up. Supported by this community of helpers and fellow travelers, Sarah realized she wasn't alone in her struggle. She was part of the human experience, connected to every person who had ever faced hardship and found the courage to continue. 3 weeks later, Sarah landed an interview at a small nonprofit that provided educational resources to underprivileged children. The pay was less than her previous job, but as she listened to the executive director describe their mission, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just about earning a paycheck anymore. This was about purpose. She got the job, and 6 months after that, she started volunteering at Eleanor's community center every Saturday, helping newcomers navigate the overwhelming process of starting over. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and she made sure no one in that center ever felt that way. One Saturday afternoon, as Sarah was helping a young man fill out job applications, Eleanor called her into the small office they shared. The older woman looked tired, and Sarah noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she poured tea. "I need to tell you something," Eleanor said softly. "I'm sick, Sarah. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months, maybe less." The world tilted. No, there has to be something, treatments, trials, something." Eleanor shook her head gently. "I'm 87 years old, dear. I've had a good long life, a meaningful life, and I'm at peace with it." She reached across the desk and took Sarah's hand. "But I need you to make me a promise." "Anything," Sarah whispered through her tears. "Keep this place going. Keep seeing people. Keep being the hand that reaches out when someone is drowning." "Promise me." "I promise," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I promise." Eleanor passed away on a Tuesday in March, surrounded by what the hospital staff called her unconventional family, dozens of people from the community center who came to say goodbye to the woman who had seen them when they were invisible. At her memorial service, person after person stood up to share their stories of how Eleanor had changed their lives. The line of speakers stretched so long that the service ran 4 hours overtime, and no one complained. Sarah stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd, hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by one woman's decision to stop and help. "Eleanor once told me that we change the world one kindness at a time," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "Looking at all of you, I see that she was right. Each of you is proof that one person's compassion can ripple outward in ways we can't even imagine. Eleanor saved my life, and in doing so, she saved all the lives I'll go on to touch. And the same is true for every person here." She paused, pulling a small card from her pocket, the same card Eleanor had given her that day in Grand Central Terminal. "So I'm making a promise today, to Eleanor and to all of you. I will keep seeing people. I will keep reaching out my hand, and I will teach others to do the same. Because that's how we honor her. That's how we keep her alive." 2 years later, the Eleanor Chen Community Center had expanded to 3 locations across New York City. Sarah had become its executive director, dedicating her life to continuing Eleanor's mission. She still remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be that woman crying on a bench while the world rushed past. And every single day, she looked for people who needed to be seen. One evening, as she was locking up the main center, she noticed a young woman sitting on the steps outside, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Sarah sat down beside her, and the woman looked up with startled, red-rimmed eyes. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked gently. The woman shook her head, and Sarah saw herself in that gesture, saw every person who had ever felt lost and alone and invisible. She reached into her bag and pulled out a card with the center's information. My name is Sarah, she said softly. And I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not invisible, and there are people who want to help. Will you let us? The woman took the card with trembling fingers, and Sarah saw a flicker of hope cross her face. It was the same hope Eleanor had kindled in her 2 years ago, the same hope that had the power to change everything. Why are you helping me? The woman whispered. Sarah smiled, Eleanor's words flowing through her like a prayer. Because someone once stopped to help me when I needed it most. Because we change the world one kindness at a time. Because you matter and I see you. And in that moment, on those worn brownstone steps, the circle continued, one hand reaching out to another, one person refusing to let another disappear, one act of kindness rippling outward into the world. This was Eleanor's legacy, and it would live on through every person who chose to stop, to see, to help. This was the power of one compassionate soul who refused to walk past someone in pain. This was how the world changed. This was how humanity prevailed. This was love in action, one stranger at a time, one moment of grace at a time, one promise kept at a time. And it all began with her, Eleanor Chen, the woman who saw the invisible and taught others to do the same.